a prisoner of war in what they called re-education camp, subjected to hard labor and starvation for 3 years, and we don't really know what else because he doesn't really talk about it very often, as you might imagine. And when he was released, my family fled their country in the middle of the night on a boat in search of basic civil liberties: the freedom of speech, the freedom of press, the right to assemble, the right to demand more from your government without being thrown in jail, and the right to free and fair elections. I grew up in Augusta, Georgia with 4 sisters. I see 2 of my sisters standing in front of me. Is Betty here? Oh, and Big Sis in the back. And my sisters and I learned at an early age that our civil liberties are not guaranteed. We learned at an early age the sacrifices that my parents made for us to be born in America and raised in America and have the opportunities that they did not have in their home country. When I was growing up in Augusta, I often felt that I had to honor my parents' legacy, and I wasn't exactly sure how when I was growing up. They felt it was by being a doctor or a lawyer, or at the worst, a pharmacist or an engineer. That's not really what I had in mind growing up, and it was because as I was growing up and watching my parents navigate their new life, navigate what it meant being a new American in our country, speaking English with a heavy accent, and watching people overlook them, watching my mother specifically make herself smaller, shrink back, and then having to step up as a child and step in and be her translator and her advocate at the grocery store, at the mall, and at other places. So I knew that whatever I wanted to do in life, I knew I wanted to make sure that nobody had to feel the same way that my parents did. I wanted to make sure I could do what I could to leave the world a little bit better than how I have found it. So when I left for school in '99, I had a different vision for what I wanted to do. I ended up working in our public school system for 10 years in DeKalb in Atlanta, where I spent every single week in the classroom with young people. And what I saw was that our Georgia General Assembly continues to neglect our public education system, fails to adequately fund our K-12 public education system. But the kids I worked with also did not have the resources they needed in their community, including secure and affordable housing, public transit, healthy foods, all the things that young people need in order to graduate and build an economic future for themselves. That's what compelled me to run for office in 2017 when Stacey Abrams stepped up and offered herself as our governor of Georgia 4 years ago. And I've served at the General Assembly for 5 years, and during those 5 years, I've watched a lot of laws get passed that have not been helpful for Georgians living in our state. And it's not just the laws that have been passed, it is the laws that are not passed, including Medicaid expansion, failing to give 600,000 Georgians access to health and care, defunding our public education system, passing a 6-week abortion ban, which was one of the most traumatizing legislative sessions I have endured. Hundreds of women came to our Capitol every single day and expressed their fears and anxiety around what that would look like for them and their loved ones. And then, of course, enduring what happened in 2020 when Republicans and the former president tried to overturn the results of the election, where they delegitimized our democracy, where they undermined the most important institution in our country. And instead of fighting against these people who wanted to overturn the will of the people, our legislature passed a 98-page voter suppression bill. That 98-page bill is predicated on lies. It contains many of the conspiracy theories that Trump and Giuliani amplified throughout our country. Behind closed doors, they admitted the election was not stolen. Behind closed doors, they admitted that this bill was created and crafted to make it harder for Georgians to vote. And right now, our state has experienced some of those things during this election cycle. It is harder to vote by mail. These are facts. These are numbers. Under this bill, if you apply to vote by mail, the rejection rate has increased. If you receive your ballot, the rejection rate has also increased. We've seen an increase in voter challenges, including vigilantes coming into our state, challenging the eligibility of at least 65,000 Georgians, including military overseas, including college students, including a woman who was living out of her car who wanted to exercise her freedom to vote. And what Republicans will tell you is that high voter turnout means that Senate Bill 202 did not have an impact on Georgians. And I'm running for Secretary of State because I believe every eligible Georgian should have the freedom to vote and the freedom to vote without barriers.
Yes.
That's right.
I believe it's important to amplify the voices of Georgians who have had trouble casting their ballots,
Yes.
including the college student who did not have enough money to FedEx his ballot, and a friend of mine had to Cash App him so he could send his ballot through the mail in order for it to count, including the mother whose daughter applied to vote by mail, and her ballot actually got returned back to her yesterday. She had to use her Delta Sky miles to fly home and cast her ballot to vote. Including the military overseas voter who lives in the state of California, whose voting eligibility has been challenged, an older black man living in the South, and when he was asked to explain his voting eligibility, you could tell that it was traumatizing for him in the year of 2022 in a state like Georgia in the Deep South. So I've been running on this campaign because I care about every single Georgian and their ability to vote, regardless of their party affiliation. I'm running for Secretary of State because I was privileged enough to live in the district represented by John Lewis for my entire adult life.
Yes.
And what he taught us was the value of the vote, that it is sacred, that it is our most powerful nonviolent tool, that is the way that we create change for the world, that at 19 years old, he crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge and got his skull bashed in and almost died for the sacred right to vote. And I take great offense when voting rights are rolled back for any Georgian. And before he died, he was still fighting for our right to vote, fighting for federal voting rights protection. As a lawmaker, I have witnessed all of these attempts to roll back our right to vote, the attempts to try to eliminate Sunday voting, the attempts to try to disenfranchise Georgians who want to just exercise their freedom to vote. Why are they so afraid of people wanting to exercise their freedom to vote? And I have also worked with organizers on the ground who showed up session after session after session after session and fought on behalf of Georgians, knowing that it was an uphill battle. I have also worked with organizers who have gone door to door to cure the ballots of 95-year-old seniors living in the state of Georgia whose ballots have been flagged for rejection. I have worked with Georgia organizers who have gone door to door to pass the message on that we should be voting early and voting in person because they were afraid that the new laws would get people caught up in the system and that their votes would not be counted. I have worked with Georgia organizers who were on doors, on calls, on text banks throughout this election cycle, understanding that it is a hard year for Democrats. It's an uphill battle in Georgia, and it has always been an uphill battle in Georgia. And I leave with no regrets because I value the truth and I value the message that we have been amplifying across the state of Georgia, which is our freedom to vote is sacred and it is tied to every issue that we care about, including the right to choose. And as an adult, I am now living for the first time in my life during a time in which the generations of Georgians coming behind me have fewer rights than I do. And I have always felt that this election has been about showing up for those coming up behind us and about showing up for those who came before us. Along the campaign trail, I have met so many inspiring and resilient Georgians who are kind and friendly. Don't y'all just love the South? Southerners are nice everywhere, every part of Georgia. And there are so many voters who have been counting on us to make sure that we show up and we fight this fight for them. The Georgians in South Georgia, in Buena Vista, population less than 2,000, when a 94-year-old veteran who fought in the Korean War shows up to see Stacey Abrams with his daughters and his granddaughters in tow because she gives him hope for a better future, because she is somebody who believes that every Georgian should have access to health care and quality public education and a quality of life. And for the seniors in Clayton County who have limited English proficiency, who forgave my very choppy Vietnamese skills, who understood only that a daughter of refugees was running for a statewide office in Georgia, and that ain't nothing they have ever seen before. And despite the fact that many of them are not political and many of them do not belong to the same political party than me, they were really, really proud. They were really proud to see somebody who could understand their struggles, who could understand their trauma, who could understand their pain, and who could communicate with them in my choppy Vietnamese. A couple in Forest Park who has lived here for 20 years exercised their right to vote for the very first time because they wanted to vote for the daughter of refugees. Yes. And to the 8-year-old girl in Grovetown, Georgia, which is 30 minutes away from my hometown of Augusta, where I used to tutor elementary school in Grovetown, who walked up to me, looked at me, and she said, "You look like me." Because when I was 8 and when I was growing up, there was nobody who looked like me in Georgia politics. And for the 100-year-old woman in Clayton County who showed up to see Georgia Democrats with a Stacey Abrams doll in her hand, who waited patiently to get it signed, I have witnessed so many Georgians who feel overlooked and left behind, feel seen and feel heard. I have seen so many Georgians who have been overlooked and left behind draw hope and inspiration from our Democratic ticket, from Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock, from Stacey Abrams, from me. Because for the first time in their lives, people are talking to them and seeing them and hearing them and understanding what their needs are and are fighting for them in the state of Georgia. I was in Douglasville a couple weeks ago, and I was at a barber shop. There was an older gentleman waiting to get his hair cut, and I said to him, "Sir, what are the issues that are most important to you?" And without hesitation, he said women's rights. And he went on to tell me that he has 2 granddaughters that attend colleges in Georgia. His daughter died when his grandbabies were young, and he raised these 2 young women. And he knew that he was casting his ballot to vote for his granddaughters. And later that day, I was in Sandy Springs, and I met a 22-year-old organizer. And I said, "When did you get involved in politics?" And he said, "You know what? I've never been a political person. But when Roe v. Wade was overturned, I heard my mother wailing. And I decided I needed to do everything I could for this election." So this is really about the generations coming behind us, but also those who came before us, who fought for the fundamental freedoms that are under attack today. And it's also about ourselves and exercising our own power. And it is about learning how to continue to build that power in a state that has been so often discounted for us. Mm-hmm. We do not know the results of the election. We do know, as we have known this entire election, that this was going to be an uphill battle, and especially in my race, an uphill battle, running against an incumbent with incredibly high name ID. We knew that it was going to be hard. But I can tell you one thing, the polls were wrong. This is not going to be a 19-point race, I can tell you that much. And here's the thing, even after the polls told us it was going to be a 19-point race, all of you stood behind me. All of you invested your time, you invested your money, you invested your energy and your sweat. You were there for me, and you had my back. And you had the backs of so many Georgians. So no matter what the results are tonight, we are sending Georgians a message, and our message is counting the votes are not enough. Mm-hmm. Our message is we do not accept voter suppression.
Yes.
Our message is putting your thumb on the front end to influence who can and cannot participate in a democracy. That is wrong.
Yes.
Our message is that Georgians deserve better. Our message is that we know the right to vote has been a lifelong fight. That from the inception of this country, the efforts have always been to expand access to the ballot box. That many of us in this room would not have had the right to vote at the inception of this country. That these battles have been fought over long periods of time, that we did not win these battles right away, and that people died and bled for this right. So no matter what happens tonight, we are in this together because we believe in our democracy. We believe in a country where people can feel seen and heard, where they can utilize and exercise their power, where they can use that power to demand better for Georgians, better for themselves. So I want to thank you all tonight because we also already made a little bit of history.
Woo. Yes.
Earlier this year in June, which seems like a very, very long time ago, I became the first Asian American to win a nomination for any statewide political office on either side of the aisle. We have proven that we can change the vision of who represents us. We can change the definition of who we perceive to be electable. And I got to tell you that one of the most powerful experiences is being in this with my family. My mother, who voted for the very first time in 2016 because her 5 daughters begged her to go to the polls. This year, we did not have to beg her. This year, we learned that she was an organizer herself, that when she was at the Asian grocery store picking out a durian fruit, she made sure to tell the man who was helping her pick her fruit, "You better go vote for my daughter." And to my father, who does not share the same political affiliation as me, he has been encouraging me every step of the way. He is the one person who has said over and over again, "You can win this thing. You can win this thing. You need to keep trying, keep working." And to all of my sisters who continue to show up for me in every way, including going to a political watch party, which I don't think they typically want to do. To my amazing team, my best friend and chair, Adrienne White. To my campaign manager, Hannah Perkins. My senior advisor, Maria Banjo. Listen, Maria and I have been traveling all over the state of Georgia, and when people say, "Do you have a driver?" I'm like, "Yes, me and Maria Banjo."
You could hear all of those claps there as we're starting to see some of these candidates coming in, giving these live speeches. And of course, we're going to have them for you on the Atlanta News Facebook page and on our streaming platforms. We do want to take a look at some of the results right now. More than half of the votes have been counted for the Secretary of State's race. So far, Brad Raffensperger, the incumbent, the Republican, still does have a slight lead over Bee Nguyen. We just heard her speak there, giving this speech. We're going to be bringing you some more speeches coming up throughout the evening, so make sure to stay tuned. But we're going to end this stream.
And keep in mind, this is just 59% of those votes. A lot more election coverage coming in. You can see some of that throughout our website, atlantanewsfirst.com, and on our Atlanta News First app.